So welcome to Chapter 1 of Business Law. This chapter is basically just an overview of the American legal system. Now, the American legal system is basically stolen from the United Kingdom's or England's legal system. But we just want to go over a few things and a few reasons for our legal system. So the first thing your book talks about are the legal principles of the U.S. system. And it's important to remember that the overall goal of our legal system is the promotion of the common good, which is kind of a lofty way of saying let's all get along. The goal of our legal system is not to punish. It's to make a system where we can all find a way to live happily together. So there's four things that your book talks about, how or kind of why that's a goal of our system. And the first one is to establish standards, which means minimal acceptable behavior. So basically, what can you do that is within your rights and doesn't infringe upon somebody else's rights? Now, there are different ways to do this. One of the things that's important, very, very important for you all to know, is the difference between state law and federal law. Federal law means all 50 states. It comes from Washington, D.C., which is the head of our federal government. And these laws are enacted by Congress, U.S. Congress. And these laws affect everyone. Now, state laws are enacted individually by each state. So let me give you an example. I spent 25 years living in South Carolina. So in South Carolina, there is a law that if a police officer has someone pulled over along the side of the road, you are required to get into the left-hand lane. This is to prevent, basically, police officers from getting hit by vehicles. I don't know if there's that kind of law in North Carolina, but in South Carolina, there is. Now, you can't be pulled over in Georgia if they don't have that kind of law. That law is only specific to South Carolina. And if you want to have some fun, Google weird state laws, because there are all kinds of weird things on the books from different states. But again, a state law only applies to that particular state, whereas federal law applies to all 50 states. So the first goal or whatever of the U.S. legal system is to establish standards, the minimum acceptable behavior for everyone in society. The second one is to promote consistency. And to do this, judges use something called case law and precedent. And you will hear this throughout this course. So it's very important that you kind of get this idea right off the bat. So case law is when law was established using another case. And judges will go back and look at how other cases were decided to see if they can gain insight into how to settle their cases. There are lots of cases that are called precedent setting because they paved the way for other cases. And precedent just means that it happened before and we're going to rely on it. So to promote consistency, judges will use these case laws and precedent setting cases to make their own rulings. Another goal of the legal system in the United States is to resolve disputes. Now, just in the daily living, we have disputes. You can sue someone and you can take it to court if you have some kind of dispute with your neighbor or with a business person. But there are also a couple of ways that you can settle disputes without having to go through the legal system. Because let's be honest, hiring a lawyer is expensive. So you can go through the process of mediation and arbitration. And we're going to talk about those there's a whole chapter on those too. So I just want to bring it out there so that you're aware of it, that you can resolve disputes. You can take someone to court, or you can go to mediation or arbitration. And then the last goal of the U.S. legal system is to protect liberties and rights. Now, we all have rights. Those are the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. So there's an old saying that my rights go all the way up until they step onto your rights. So let me give you an example. You cannot yell fire in a crowded movie theater. Yes, you have the right to free speech, but your free speech ends when it could harm somebody else. So if there's a stampede because you yelled fire in a crowded movie theater, then you've intruded on somebody else's rights. So those are the 4 goals, but the overall goal of the legal system is promotion of the common good. Now there's several sources of law in the United States. The first one being the U.S. Constitution. It's not that long. I suggest if you ever have a chance to read it, you can find it online. There's little booklets. In fact, the library during U.S. Constitution Week here on campus gives out copies of the Constitution. There's common law, which is what we just talked about, case law and precedents, where judges rely on how other cases were settled. There's federal law. Remember, federal law, all 50 states. There's regulations. Now, regulations are different than laws. Regulations are carried out by administrative agencies. Some of you may have heard of OSHA. That's an administrative agency, and they have all kinds of regulations. And those regulations come from the general reason why OSHA was established, but those are not necessarily laws. Those are regulations. And then there are state laws, which we talked about just briefly. State law only is in effect for that particular state. And then there's such things as local laws. Typically, you see local laws with not littering. All of the local, the state, and the regulations have to be constitutional. In other words, they can't be in conflict with the U.S. Constitution. But those are the sources of law in the United States. And finally, your book talks about several, let me see if I can pull this up for you, several business laws, several areas of business law. Now, there's no such thing as a business law per se. Congress doesn't go in and say, okay, this is business law number 0013. But these are laws that affect business. Of course, dispute settlements. There are disputes in companies. You said you'd get it here in 15 days, and it was 20 days. That's a dispute. Ethics. There's a lot of ethical issues in business that typically end up in disputes. But we'll talk a little bit about ethics and the law in this course. The Commerce Clause is in the U.S. Constitution, and it was kind of one of these clauses that nobody paid a lot of attention to until after, let's say, the Civil War. And then it kind of grew and grew and grew, the importance of it, and through cases, it kind of exploded into, this is basically the backbone of most business laws now, is the Commerce Clause. And we will talk about this. Criminal liability is when somebody does something so bad that it's not in civil court, it's in criminal court. In civil court means that you're going to get a monetary settlement. Criminal court means you're found guilty and you're going to jail. So some of the cases, it's been a little while ago, but Enron and Bernie Madoff, they went to jail because of what they did. Tort law. Tort means that you hurt someone, not deliberately, but for whatever reason, be it negligence or a warranty or something, you hurt somebody, the business hurt somebody. Contracts. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about contracts because business is kind of built on contracts. Labor law. We are not going to cover labor law in this course. We'll talk about it in a few minutes, but there is an entire course here at Mitchell called employment law. So if you're interested in labor law, employment law and regulations is a class you should take. Antitrust law. Antitrust means basically a monopoly. Now, this is not to say that you can't have a monopoly in the United States. The first one that comes to mind is the electricity at your house. That is a monopoly, but it's regulated by the government. They can't just change their prices. They have to go through the Public Service Commission. So we will talk a little bit about antitrust laws and monopolies and why they are bad, but why they can still exist. Unfair trade practices. Lots of unfair trade practices. We're going to cover this. We'll talk about bait and switch, where something is advertised and you go to buy it and you don't get what you bought, what you thought you were getting. That's an unfair trade practice. And then the last business kind of section of law that we're going to talk about is securities regulation. Now, securities are stocks and bonds. Those are typically, sometimes gold and silver gets thrown into there, but those are the security regulations. So there are 10 areas of business law that your textbook talks about. We're going to cover most of them. Some of them we'll spend more time on because they're more prevalent in the area of business. So just to give you a recap, legal principles of the United States, the overall goal is the promotion of the common good. And then there are 4 other goals under that. The sources of the law in the United States. Very important that you understand these 6 sources. So please read. If you have questions, let me know. And then the areas of business law that your textbook covers, there's 10 of them. We're going to cover most of them. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.